Hello and welcome to episode number 96 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And welcome to hockey season. It's hockey time. That's how
Yeah.
we're gonna lead off this episode.
Is it time for Who Cares You Suck to come back?
Let's will that into existence. I would appreciate that. Yeah, no, we of course it was finals week this last week. And of course, Jake is our new champion. Congratulations to Jake. We're going to have him on later this episode to talk about the finals matchup and everything that went on this season. But of course, if there is a finals winner, there's always a finals loser, and that finals loser was me. It was I who lost. Right now, we're still recording on Sunday night. It hasn't quite gone final yet, but it's 7-4-1 right now. And unless something happens, unless Judge homers tonight, if the Yankees come back from rain delay, it looks like it's going to stay at 7-4-1. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about here with that finals matchup. Where do we want to begin?
It's weird because usually there's like multiple matchups to talk about and we have to pick which matchup, but there is only one matchup to talk about this week. I'll let you kind of give more of the details because obviously you've been a bit more in tune with your matchup than I have, given that I've had nothing at stake this week. From a big picture perspective, looking at this from the outside, was kind of felt like a letdown, and like in the sense that like there was a lot of drama, a lot of anticipation, a lot of major twists and turns during the semis week. And you and I both acknowledged multiple times over the past couple episodes that like the semis week always feels like the best, like most intense week. And last week's semis matchups were intense as hell. I mean, they were exciting. I know that Eric and I came out on the losing end, but we played some really competitive matchups there at the end, and it was fun. Your team just fell out of sync all week and just never got traction. I mean, I think it really began Monday when McClanahan left the game with the injury and he already wasn't pitching well. There's a couple times this week where you left some guys on your bench that you meant to get in your lineup. It just didn't happen. It ultimately did not end up affecting the matchup in any way, but like it just like it never felt like your team was like on top of anything. Like it felt pretty quickly from the beginning of the week. Like it felt like Jake was going to win, and like you had opportunities, especially offensively, to pull things back your way, and you did. But it just like coming into today, like I didn't really think there was a shot of you winning. It didn't look that way at any point, and it felt a little anticlimactic, which last year's finals also kind of felt. I think it's been a while since we had like a really good close finals matchup, honestly. I don't know what it is, but the semis week for the second consecutive year was way more intense. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will say, yeah, this matchup, it was a weird week in the sense that it felt like more so than usual. It wasn't announced who was going to be in certain teams' lineups until way later than normal. Or like there was always one afternoon game every day, it seemed, and you could never figure out who's playing and you could never get your moves in time. At least that's how I felt. But that being said, there really was I had no shot the way my pitchers pitched this week. Really, anything I could have done with my lineup, I wouldn't have been able to do with how I pitched. I got 0 saves and 0 holds, which is just kind of disgusting. And I hit amazingly. Not amazingly, but especially given how I started. To finish with 50 plus runs and RBIs. I could even, if I get a little lucky later today, finish with 60 runs. But either way, 50 plus runs, 50 plus RBI. Yeah, the hitting wasn't the problem. It was the pitching. And yeah, I led at the end of Monday, but really I dug myself a big hole. And even Friday morning I was down 11-1. So I am very happy with how I played Friday, Saturday, and to a lesser extent Sunday, to get myself back into this matchup. And I think if I it was definitely unlikely for me to win going into Sunday, but I definitely could have had I had a better on base percentage, or say Jake had a lower on base percentage today. He had a 390 OBP. Say he was at like 320 and I was at like 380 instead of 350. I could have flipped on base and say McClanahan didn't get blown up today like he did. And I guess Kendall Graveman had a bad appearance out of the bullpen. And if someone like I don't know, I could have maybe flipped Whip, although everything pitching wise went just about as bad as it possibly could have for Jake today, and he still and Whip didn't end up particularly close, so maybe I was a little overly optimistic about Whip going into today. Which is kind of funny because I had said going into the week, Jake's got 3 great starters with 3 great matchups today, Sunday. He could pull off a big comeback a la you in the 2020 semis. And that did not work out. Freddie Peralta got pulled early with an injury. Edward Cabrera got blown up by the Nationals, and Luis Castillo got blown up by the Royals. Yeah, that went just about as poorly as it could have for Jake. Meanwhile, I streamed a great start from Adrian Sampson, and I streamed a good start. He got paddocked, but it was Jose Suarez. But yeah, so I guess Whip, if this didn't flip Whip probably wasn't going anywhere, which means the best I probably could have hoped for was a tie. Which means maybe I should have gone after holds today instead of Whip today. But yeah, either way, I finished with no holds. And yeah, I don't know. Jake played really well. I mean, he struck out 85. He got saves and holds. I got no saves and holds. He just he didn't hit as well as I did this week, but he stole 11 bases, which is the most bases his team has ever stolen in a week. And that's a thing I'm working on, franchise records for the spreadsheet that I've got 9 out of 12 teams done. I'll make a formal announcement once I finish sometime this coming week. But that's something I'm very excited about for next season. Definitely a lot more to say about this matchup. But that's all for the broad storylines I have before we dive into individual players. What else do you have?
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I mean, I think you kind of summed it up pretty nicely. I just, definitely a disappointing end of the season to you, but Jake's a very great team. I mean, big picture here, I'm going to be interested to see what this means for Jake's team moving forward, right? Because I think, you and I have discussed this a bit off air a little bit, and I still believe this. I still think between you, me, Eric, and Jake, I think Jake had the 4th most talented roster of the 4 of us. Which is not to say it's a bad roster. It's a very good roster, but I think that you, me, and Eric have better rosters. But his team matched up really well against us. And, I feel like at different points in time, I've seen how teams have matched up against me, and I've seen what happened in a playoff matchup, or if they beat me a couple times in a regular season, and I feel like I'm consciously thinking okay, hey, what can I do to put together a team that will, be better against a team who just really beat me this year. I played some very close matchups with Jake, so maybe there's some stuff on the margins I can do. I'm sure you're going to want to make some adjustments after this, but it'll be interesting to see what Jake does, kind of the target's on his back a little bit now. Having won a championship, he joins an elite crew here with me and Eric. And I feel like that puts a little bit of a different, it's just different. And I'm curious to see how teams will adjust to what Jake did this season. And, I think it's just an impressive showing how he was able to beat me 3 times. He was able to beat Eric at least once. I'm blanking on how
once in a tie. He beat him twice. He was winning at the end of two Sundays, and
Yeah.
then one of the matchups turned into a tie afterwards.
And then he won 2-1 against you.
Yes.
So he only had one loss against me, you, and Eric this season, and then the tie. I mean, granted, those were some really close wins in some of them, but they were wins. I'm I'm trying to think. Like last year, I think I lost one game to you and Eric and Connor all season until the finals, or until the semis. I lost my second in that group to Connor. So not quite as good as what Jake did. And the difference is Jake was able to win the championship doing that. So I mean, I can't remember a team who's had that good of a record against the other top three teams. So kudos to Jake. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, kudos to Jake. He just had a steady season. He finished second in the regular season. In a steady week this week. I mean, I had I guess higher highs and lower lows than him this week. For example, I on the whole hit better. But my pitching was just really bad. Whereas he managed to have solid hitting and solid pitching outside of ERA. And that was good enough. And he managed to just be solid across the board and take his wins where they were. Yeah, I'll say definitely, yeah, curious to see where this team uh is moving forward, what they look like next year. But yeah, like you always say, flags fly forever. And he certainly hasn't done anything to hurt his long-term plans. His strategy from a couple years ago of picking up really young, high upside, high variance minor leaguers as prospects has really worked out well for his farm because it's one of the better ones in the league. Really, I mean the four semis finalist teams all if we're counting, you had built a solid farm system before you traded most of it away, but the other three semis teams, me, Jake, and Eric, are really strong farm systems. So it's so that definitely a lot of sustainability for all of us.
I still got some
um
there, man. You know how I make those trades. Look at the Connor Norby and Pete Crow Armstrong. Harry Ford's looking really good. Kevin Alcantara, Jordan Westberg. There's some pieces there. Don't hate.
all right, but it's still not quite on the same level. But
It's not,
let's
but yeah, fair. I'll give you
yeah.
that.
Yeah, but let's talk about some individual players. We'll talk about my team first. Some of the guys who played well. I got a great week from Francisco Lindor. He would have been my matchup MVP had I won the finals. Had 7 runs, a pair of doubles, drove in 9. He had a homer. He had a 444 on base. Third great week in a row from Aaron Judge. Really every week has been great for him, but he had 3 doubles. He hit a homer. Only drove in the 1 run, but he had a 462 on base. He would have been my playoffs MVP had I been the finals winner. Pair of homers from Carlos Santana. Hunter Renfroe had a great week. He homered on Sunday and Saturday. Drove in 6 runs. Other than that, I will say Alec Boehm was solid. Brandon Nimmo had a 438 OBP, but he was hurt for a chunk of the week. Juan Soto had his second great week in a row, and it looks like he's broken out of that funk. He homered, had a couple of doubles, had a 500 OBP. I'm not worried about him going forward anymore. Profar had a good week. But some guys who struggled. Well, I really missed Yandy Diaz. He was hurt for much of the week. Not a great week. Isaiah Kiner Fleffen, I cut him midweek. I ended up having Jonathan Daza in my lineup a couple days, and he scored 4 runs, but only had a 100 on base percentage, which is weird, very weird. Harrison Bader didn't do much for me, although he did drive in 3 and he had a stolen base. So it could have been worse. Terrible week from Vlad, terrible week from Rizzo. Just nothing around, no way around that. As for my pitching, the one guy who pitched really well was Clayton Kershaw, and I'm glad I had him because his 2 quality starts flipped that for me. He had 17 Ks, 2.25 ERA, 117 WHIP. He was just remarkable. But on the other hand, that was about it. I've mentioned Adrian Sampson. And I got a good start from you, Darvish. But that's about all of the positives. Framber Valdez did not pitch well. Shane McClanahan made 2 starts and he didn't pitch very well in either of them. Gave up 5 runs against Houston and 4 runs against Toronto. Sure, those are both tough matchups, but he's supposed to be my ace. Hector Neris, I had in my lineup one day. He got blown up. Kendall Graveman got blown up in my bullpen. Liam Hendricks only pitched once this week, and he didn't even get a save. No one got a save. All in all, just a rough week for my pitching outside of Kershaw. But yeah, that's about it for my team. Let's talk about Jake's team now. They hit well. They didn't pitch great, but they pitched well enough. Let's talk about the hitters, and I'm gonna skip the guy who won matchup MVP for now. He streamed a 3 for 4 from Jesse Winker with a pair of runs. That was a great pickup. What happened with Winker? Was he hurt? Did he only play the one day? Or maybe he was only in Jake's lineup the one day. But either way, the one day Jake put him in, he went 3 for 4. Michael Harris, another great week. JT Real Muto played well. Yordan Alvarez had a 400 on base, and he drove in 3 runs, but he didn't homer this week. Corey Seager had a good week, and that's a bummer. I'm gonna lose in a week to Jake where Yordan Alvarez didn't even homer. That's Jake's trump card there. And he had a fine week, but he didn't hit the homer like he always does. But anyway, Manny Machado played well. But the matchup MVP, and this is a guy I think we want to talk about at length, and that's Steven Kwan. Steven Kwan had a hot start to the season. Jake called him up to his major league roster on April 15th. Had a hot streak. He sent him down and then called him back up in June. And he just kind of had a rough middle part of the season. Not really slugging well. He only has 5 homers on the season. I know we talked a little bit on the podcast. Is this a guy Jake wants to hold on to? He could drop him. He could pick up someone else. He could trade him while he's a popular name. But this week, God, it paid off. This week, Steven Kwan was outstanding. He homered twice, including a grand slam on Sunday. He scored 9 runs, drove in 10, stole 4 bases. He single-handedly carried this team. Just an absolutely remarkable week. One of the best finals weeks I've seen from an individual player. 471 OBP. How about Steven Kwan? I know your former roommate Noah likes him.
Yeah, this is an interesting side story. I don't know how many of you met my college roommate Noah, but Noah, for some reason, really likes Steven Kwan. Steven Kwan and Willens Astudillo are his 2 favorite players, but he was at the White Sox game this week and watched Kwan play. He's chatted me about Kwan before a couple of times, and he's like, Kwan is legit. And I searched this up actually, and would you believe that Steven Kwan is over 4 WAR this year?
Really? I guess, yeah, the defense.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have guessed he has a 122 WRC plus. He walks more than he strikes out. I always love that in a player. He's got basically no power, but he is such he's one of those just solid stabilizing assets to have at the end of the bench. And this week, he wasn't just the solid stabilizing asset. He was the asset that really helped propel Jake to a win. So I mean, I know Jake at different times this year considered moving off of him, and it looks like it paid off that he didn't. I mean, I don't know what Steven Kwan's ceiling looks like. Like maybe like a 5 homer, 20 stolen base guy might be the ceiling here with a high OBP, but it's definitely still a valuable piece to have. And good for him. It really worked out this week. Good for Kwan. He's had a really nice season, and I think it's another example of the Jake pipeline development kind of working out here. Not only with Kwon, but guys like Michael Harris too. Um,
Mhm.
he's got some interesting ones, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a lot of guys who struggled in his lineup this week. Not a great week from Luke Voigt or Josh Bell. O'Neill Cruz didn't do a whole lot, although he did score 3 runs. Matt Olson had a rough week as well, but he did drive in a run this week for the first time in a long time. What did Jake say? First time since in almost 50 at bats. But other than that, great hitting week. Pitching wise, it was a little more tough. He had a good start from Blake Snell, who struck out 13 in 7 shutout innings. Good start from Sandy Alcantara, who struck out 11, allowed 1 run in 8 innings. Ryan Presley made some good relief appearances. He got 3 saves. He got a save and 2 holds from Sam Hentges, who's a guy he's been streaming. He's owned him on 3 separate occasions this month. And he's certainly been good. Raisel Iglesias got a hold also. But yeah, other than that, not a whole lot. Kyle Freeland, he streamed today. Yeah, he didn't need to do that. There was no reason to do that. And it didn't work out.
If anything, you could argue, and I mean, it didn't, that it could have just hurt him in ERA and WHIP. Like, not that ERA and WHIP were particularly close, but like you said, a couple of like, if you had a better pitching day, maybe it could have, made things a bit different there. Like, he wasn't at risk of losing strikeouts, I don't think, or quality. I mean, if he lost quality starts, it really didn't matter, right? So that one was weird. If anything, he probably should have streamed saves and holds to preserve the ERA and WHIP, and get him a little more of a cushion there against you.
Yeah, no. Either way, it didn't end up mattering. But yeah, Freeland was a weird choice. He got blown up. Luis Castillo didn't have a great week either. Some other guys, Taylor Rogers pitched poorly out of the bullpen. Nick Martinez didn't pitch very well. But yeah, Edward Cabrera was another guy who started Sunday. I think we mentioned him, but he didn't pitch well. This was one that we thought could have been a great start for him against Washington. But yeah, that all being said, it didn't matter. Jake got the win because his bats played well, because he had a great on base percentage. I believe at the end of Tuesday he had like a 480 on base percentage, and I was at like 220. So it's amazing I made it as close as I did.
Yeah,
But he won because of the quantity, and he won because his pitchers were less bad than mine.
that's just how it goes sometimes.
It is. But yeah, no, that's really all I have to say about this matchup. I know there are definitely a few other peripheral stories. And I know you want to talk about something you call the finals tax. And you got some interesting players out of that. Why don't you talk about that?
Yes, I told Cam earlier this week what I dubbed the finals tax, and the finals tax is pretty much you are always going to cut an interesting player or two in a close finals matchup that another team will be interested in for at some point in the offseason, or to pick up immediately. But that you would like to keep, but that you need that roster spot to be able to go out and win the finals. And I think there are 2 interesting players that got cut that I put waiver claims in on this week successfully. Or one was a waiver claim. One had been floating out in free agency for a couple days after he was cut, and I was going to pick him up if I lost in the semis, which I did. One of them was Colton Wong. Colton Wong is 101st in the player rater as of today, so just outside the top 100 here. And he's got 15 home runs and 16 stolen bases. So, anybody who's and he's a 7th ranked second baseman. Anybody who's a 15-15 player definitely has some value in our league. So maybe he's a trade chip, maybe he's a bench bat. And then you cut Noah Syndergaard, which I thought was interesting because I know you've been pretty high on Syndergaard all year. I know Syndergaard has not been the player as of old, but he's put up. He's still 30. This is his first full year back from the surgery. I wonder maybe if he'll bounce back a bit. Although when the Phillies announced that they were going to use him as a piggyback guy, you really had no reason to hold on to him, and I think it was the correct decision to cut him. But maybe those are two guys I keep as kind of end of the roster guys. Maybe they end up getting traded, but I thought you all had to get some interesting players on your way to the finals, and I'm glad to benefit. So thanks for that.
Yeah, I'll speak to Syndergaard. He is a guy that I've kind of banged the drum for a little bit. I've thought he's had a surprisingly good year, better than he's gotten credit for. But yeah, when they decided to piggyback him, you're right. I had no choice. I needed to get someone in there who was going to make starts for me. I used that spot to stream. Well, really, I cut him when Zach Wheeler came off of the IL. But I used that spot so that I could add guys. And yeah, I can't speak too well to Colton Wong, but it sounds like he had a great season, and Jake just needed to make some more moves.
Yeah, Jake, if I remember correctly, caught him to pick up Tony Kemp. So I wonder if maybe Wong wasn't playing one of the days or something, and he decided to go and add a Kemp. Yeah, Colton Wong's had a fairly solid season here. So it's a career high in WRC plus right now, actually 117. So yeah, we'll
Just
see.
something you gotta do sometimes, though.
Yeah, I mean, like I remember the year I was in the final, or the first year I was in the finals, I didn't make those cuts, and I ended up regretting it. So then the second year I made sure to make those cuts, and I cut Chris Taylor before he had the really good year, which was a bummer. I cut Alex Colomé, who did not have a good year the year after, so that one worked out. But it's sometimes you have to make the difficult moves, and I wouldn't trade my championship in year 3 for Chris Taylor. So, same thing with Jake here. And honestly, probably same thing with you with Syndergaard. But if you want Syndergaard back, let me know.
Yeah, I think the end game here is you trade Syndergaard to some unsuspecting team for a second rounder. And that's what's gonna happen here. I think, yeah, there's no real way to predict what's going to happen, but yeah, if you cut someone and they play well, that always sucks if you don't get the title. And
Well,
if you
also kind of speaking of that, and I don't know if this is quite a finals tax. I mean, partially for the simple reason he wasn't cut during the finals, but he was cut during like a pretty important matchup at the end here. Whit Merrifield was cut by Eric, and I know Whit has not been playing as much this year since he got traded to Toronto, but I wonder if maybe Whit's gonna have a better year next year, and maybe it won't look as good.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, if Eric thought that he was going to cut Witt anyway at the roster crunch in a month or so, then I can't really fault him for that, since he's just cutting him early instead of late. But yeah, I'd be curious. I've never been the biggest fan of Witt, or really any guy with his profile, but yeah, who knows? Especially if he is he a free agent after this year?
No, Toronto has an option, and it's not an expensive option. It's a oh no, it's not an option. it is a bargain of a contract, 5 years, 23 million. So they have him for like 4 million or something next year. Like even at the price is like a flexible bench bet, even like that's a really good price. So I imagine he's staying in Toronto, unless Toronto decides it's just not really a great fit on the roster and they want to trade him, which I could also see.
Yeah, that's true. I guess who knows? He didn't yeah, like we were saying, he didn't play well down the stretch, and he didn't play super often down the stretch either.
He had
Um,
weird seasons. Like he started really bad for Kansas City and then was pretty much like playing like he was normally, but he had such a bad start that like the numbers didn't catch up. And then Toronto just wasn't playing him frequently. So and he was bad at the bottom of the lineup and stuff. So just never really quite worked out.
yeah, it reminds me a little bit of when the Marlins traded Justin Bour to the Phillies at a deadline. Bour had been coming off of a great season, and he was in the middle of an okay season. I know I think started out better than he finished. But yeah, he was kind of an interesting guy, and maybe they should have traded him a year earlier, when his value was higher. But he just kind of he didn't get a whole lot of playing time, and then his career was kind of over.
Yeah, it's just that's how it works. Sometimes like I think Trey Mancini's another good example of this year, where sometimes you just get traded to a team in the middle of the year and it's just not a great fit, and then the numbers go down for some reason. And there's also like personal stuff too. You're uprooting for 2 months. That's not easy. And sometimes it just kind of peters out, or in Merrifield's case, maybe it's age, and sometimes they come back the next year once they're more settled in and it works out. Um,
Yeah,
who
I guess you truly never know. And that's the thing. You truly never know what's going to happen in
oh,
baseball or in our league, particularly, because that's what we're talking about here. This is 2 years in a row now that a team that missed the playoffs the prior season has won the finals.
or made it.
Um,
Oh yeah, because Eric, yeah, did not make the playoffs in year three, and not only that, last year we had two teams who had not made the playoffs, and it was also your first finals appearance this year. So we're getting a little. I mean, I guess Eric last year didn't make it diverse. He already had two championships before that, but it's nice to see some different faces in here. As much as I hate it, but it makes for a more competitive league, which just means we all have to keep upping our games. And hey, if it was predictable, we wouldn't have as much fun with it. So I'm kind of glad it's not predictable.
ex-
Yeah.
exactly. And that leads me to an impromptu question for you, which is which team that missed the playoffs this year is most likely to win it all next year?
Oh, that's a good question. That was going to be one of my off-season preview questions for you. I'm glad we're getting in early on this. Uh, Let me pull up the list of teams here. Okay, I don't think it's got to be Andrew or Rusvik. I'm going to say it's Andrew, and I just think that Andrew has a little more upside with some of these younger players that he has, like Bobby Witt. And he'll have like Josh Jung coming back next year. And I still think he has, a full season to Nolan Gorman, Grayson Rodriguez comes up, players like that. Um, and I think we had talked about all off season last year how like, hey, maybe Andrew could sneak into the playoffs this year, but if not, 2023 looks more like the year. Um, and I'm gonna stick with that prediction. I think 2023 is the year. I would say that Ruthvik also has a very good chance of finding his way back into playoffs, but I think there's some changes he needs to make to his roster, particularly on the hitting side. I thought he did a great job at the trade deadline, attacking the hitting, but I think he needs to do a little more for me to be comfortable. He's also traded away most of his farm, so I'm curious to see what moves he can make this offseason. But maybe trading from the pitching depth, which I feel like is something we've been saying for a couple of years now. But I'll give it to Andrew. I'll give it to the young, hot rising team.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I was gonna give it to Ruthvik myself, just because he has the pieces there. He has some core guys. He has Acuna, he has DeGrom, he has Devers, and that's a championship core. And you throw in Shane Bieber, um, and among others, he has a core.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were saying he built at the deadline, kind of built some guys around that, and it didn't end up with him making the playoffs, but it very easily could have. Um, And I don't know. I think he has not a whole lot of work to do. Well, that's not true. He has a lot of work to do, but I think the hard part is done. Whereas, say for some other teams, they don't need to make a trade for a superstar. Um, or some other teams would need to make a trade for a superstar. Ruthvik's already got those guys.
That's fair. I
Um,
think a couple smaller trades could easily give him the supplementary offensive pieces that he needs. I don't think it has to be anything super crazy.
yeah, and the last team I want to mention, how about EBO? They've got a lot of guys who are probably going to be debuting next year. What if some of them break out? Who knows? I don't think they're ready next year, certainly, to go on a run. But say, yeah, Ezekiel Tovar's in the majors. What if Colton Cowser breaks out? What if Jackson Chorio comes up in September and pushes them into the playoffs? And what if some of their active young major leaguers all break out at the same time?
I
Such
don't
as
I don't see it.
Torkelson. He had a great down the stretch. I certainly don't. I'm not expecting this, certainly, but I think there's so much upside with their young guys. They have a lot of guys who are young with upside. I haven't mentioned Gunnar Henderson and Miguel Vargas, who are both in the majors. Maybe Andrew Vaughn breaks out too. Obviously, a lot would have to go right at the same time, but they're kind of a fun team to dream on at this point. They're
They're
like
a
I
fun team.
was at the end of 2019.
Yeah, they're a fun team to dream on, but they have no pitching. That's my issue with them. And I think unlike you in 2019, the difference I see is you had a couple still like established, like you had Aaron Judge, you had Chris Bryant, you had gotten Juan Soto by that point, right? So um they have a lot of guys at upside, but I don't think they have like a couple guys like that who I can really be like I can bank on next year, you know.
Yeah, so maybe they're like me at the end of 2018. They had a big draft pick coming, but they hadn't made the trade for Bueller and Wheeler like I had made.
Right.
Like Duncan had made. Duncan was the impetus behind that. But yeah, essentially.
Their best like Andrew Vaughn might be their best position, or Andre Gimenez, one of those two. Andrew Vaughn or Andre Gimenez might be their best position player right now, right? And like neither of them are like absolute carrier team studs.
Yeah, I
Uh,
like Jimenez a lot, but yeah.
no, but believe me, all they have a lot of fun names on this roster that definitely interest me. I mean, Jimenez, Henderson, Vargas, Vaughn, Josh Naylor, Torkelson. But there's also a lot of holes still on this roster, even if guys start coming up. I mean, Strider and Cortez are nice. I mean, Flaherty, let's see how he bounces back from the injury. I forgot they had him, honestly. Scooble. I see the vision, and for the first time in a while, what I'll say about EVO is like I feel like there is a consistent vision, whereas kind of the last year or two with them before Sully came on, like I wasn't seeing the big picture as much. I see what the big picture is for them now. I just think it's way too early.
Hmm. That's
But
very fair. But yeah, again, this is a long shot that I thought I would
no,
shout
it
out.
is, it is, it is. But while we're here talking about EVO, I might as well give my thoughts.
Yeah, no, to your old rival from the early days of the league.
My goodness, they're always going to be a rival. It's never going to be fun playing EVO. Hey, EVO beat me this year or tied me something. I think they tied me once, so
Yeah, they got a win over Eric too, didn't they?
they did.
Man. But this year is no longer this year. This year is over. Um, season 5 is in the books. We've played 5 full seasons of this league. It's incredible. We've had 2 full seasons in the podcast era, plus half of a playoffs. And I think this league is really starting to settle in. And we kind of say that anything before 2020 doesn't feel super real, and that's because our league's lineup kind of locked in. Like like we got Andrew at the end of 2019, and we got Jake at the end of 2019, and Yuki was in the middle of 2019, and all these guys who are regular active league members who are in it for the long term were just kind of starting to become faces in the league right around the beginning of 2020. And now there's been a lot more consistency, I guess, with the exception of the bellies. But
E-
and
the
EBO
bellies,
changing an owner, but
yeah, yeah.
uh
But Zayn stayed. That was huge. It looked like Zayn was going to leave for a while, and then he decided to stay.
yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, ownership wise, of we've got a great group.
Yeah.
And
Well,
uh
I think I said from the get go, like it would take 3 years before things were really settled in here. And it took 3 years. That was accurate. So, um, when you're starting something from scratch like that, it can be hard initially, but it's you know, thankfully we got it done. So
yeah, we did. We found a nice settlement. We've kind of settled in nicely. And I guess yeah, the first 2 years I wasn't a very good team, so having I guess selfishly me being a contender now kind of feels like the default state of the league now.
it does.
Um,
It really is. It's crazy. And like EBO being a finals team like feels so far away. Like EBO as a playoff team does not even feel like it existed, even though they were in the playoffs last year.
yeah, I guess that's a little bit of recency bias, but I
No,
think
but
yeah,
like, yeah, I mean, just like the direction they're heading now. And like last year, like, yeah, they made the playoffs, but they weren't like, a serious contender. Uh
yeah, I mean they were the 2 seed in our roto regular season.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, that is. I'll give you that.
But yeah, no, and then yeah, a lot of I don't know, but it's also fun seeing teams get better. Like Connor's team is good now, um and other teams have kind of come and gone. We've had Anthony's kind of on an every other year thing. So maybe he'll be good again in 2023.
And the injuries
And
up for him this year.
mhm, yeah, that's true. Who knows? And we got yeah teams on the come up like Andrew, and then teams maybe um teams like Yuki who knows what they're going to be year to year, just a total mystery.
Jesus Christ.
Um
I still don't know what to make of Yuki.
yeah. But yeah, I guess all that being said, here's to 5 more years. We've got a good one here. We have a podcast for our league. What other leagues can say that?
Not a ton. I have a question for you. I'll put you on the
Oh,
spot. Who do you predict are going to win the next 5 championships?
do you want me to go in order?
I want you to go in order, and I'm going to record this on our sheet so we can look back at this in 5 years and see how accurate we were.
Oh God. Okay. I think Eric gets his revenge next year.
Ooh, all right.
I think you win the following year.
Okay.
Then I think it's then I'm going to say I win 2 in a row. And
Ooh,
then
okay.
finally Andrew. Andrew
And
finally gets his ducks in a row. So I think it goes Eric, you, me, Andrew.
all right. I think I win next year. I think it's interesting that you didn't pick Jake to win any of them. I think I don't know. I'm gonna pick you in 2024.
Mm.
Um, I'll pick me in 2025, but I think that's it for this core. And then I think
Interesting. Yeah, I thought 2024 was kind of the end of your core. So you think you got another year in it.
no, because I think a lot of these guys are some of them are not super old. I mean, it's really what I'm looking at, like the old guys right now. It's like Freeman and Altuve.
That's
And
fair.
they're both aging very well. I still have like a 27-year-old Pete Alonso and a 27-year-old Cedric Mullins. a 23-year-old Tatis, like a 25-year-old Julio Urias. Like, yes, there are some guys on the team who are getting older, but like there's also a lot of guys still in their prime. And I also think some of these guys I have that are older might age fairly well. So, but I'll say Andrew in 2026. And I think I'm gonna give it to Jake in 2027. There's no way I could leave him off this list after he won this year.
All right. So there we have it.
Next 5 years.
These predictions are going to age poorly, no matter what.
Oh, I hope not. Oh, I hope my 2024 prediction is wrong. I hope you don't win, but interesting that we picked each other to win in 2024, like the opposite.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Yeah, I wonder why that is. Yeah, something about I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, there's like no proper way to predict this. I mean, maybe we have an idea for like 2023 and to an extent 2024, but like so much shit happens that like you don't really know in reality.
Exactly.
Anything else we want to discuss here?
No, that's just about everything I had. We'll be back next week on kind of off of the regular schedule we've had for the regular season, but it's off-season podcast time. We're gonna have some great segments, some fun events. We're gonna do the awards, and we're gonna have some great guests as well, all off-season, which leads us into our great guest we have today, and that is Jake, fresh off his finals victory. Was kind enough to agree to an interview to talk about his season. It's going to be great. So without further ado, here is Jake. All right, we are back now with our league champion, Jake. First and foremost, congratulations on the title. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. It means a lot to win this championship. It's an absolutely great league that I've been a part of now for 3 years. And so happy I can just be one of those top teams now. Have a competitive team that I'm sure will be in the playoffs in the future, facing off against you guys. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Has Eric shipped the trophy yet?
He's not. He messaged me about that. So I'm sure we'll get that figured out. But yeah, that'll be really cool too.
Yeah, definitely. It is as someone who's owned a trophy for a year. It is an awesome trophy. I'm sure you will enjoy being this year's wine ambassador. But let's dive in right here. So walk us through the matchup. Kind of like. So obviously you beat me 2 Sundays ago at the time of the recording of this. And so now you're preparing for Cam, that Monday. Kind of what was your thought? Like, did you have a certain strategy going into it? Certain players you knew you were going to stream, certain moves you thought you were going to make? Like, walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I knew I had obviously the 8 transactions, and I wanted to use up most of them, especially for my relievers, because I feel like that's where I can get a lot of either saves or holds just by kind of churning through guys. So I did that a few times with someone like Sam Hemkes. I think he got like a save and 2 holds or something like that for me.
Yeah, he torched me this week.
I picked him up, dropped him, picked him up right again when he got another one. So that was big for me. But really, I mean, my team didn't play as well as they did against you, Sahil. I think kind of the finals, both of us kind of limped through it, but did enough for them to get the victory. So that's all that matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. All you need to do is just do enough to win, and that you did. Your pitchers They weren't great, but they were certainly better than mine, and that's really all you needed. Yeah, I want to walk through. I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't ask about Kyle Freeland, because he's kind of a podcast mascot
Oh
of
yeah.
sorts. You picked him
Podcast
up.
mascot, is that how you describe him? That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you streamed him on Sunday. Not only did you not really need to pick up start your existing pitchers, you definitely didn't need to stream one, but you streamed Kyle Freeland. He did not pitch very well. What went into the
No,
our favorite pitcher here?
pitched well, but so I lost quality starts by one. Um, I realized that I basically had the victory no matter what, depending on who I picked up Sunday. However, there was also the chance that it was a 6-6 tie, and really I didn't want to win like that. And so I just wanted to try to get quality starts, and if it risks losing ERA and WHIP, it is what it is. But I did not expect him to pitch that bad. But yeah, I was really just going for the quality start. I mean, I had 4 starting pitchers. Freddie Peralta wasn't expecting to go 6 innings, so 3 that had a chance, none of them got a quality start. So it was not a good Sunday for my pitchers, but I took the risk and didn't end up hurting me. So that's basically the thought process that went into it.
No, definitely smart in my opinion. Felt like you had some of these pitching rate categories close to locked up, but you could flip quality starts. So yeah, I don't blame you. I probably would have done the same thing.
Let's talk about a player who was great for you last week. We talked a lot about him in our segment that we recorded, but Stephen Kwan, he's a guy who's kind of been with you for the ups and downs all year. You called him up back in April. Definitely had a lot of down stretches after that, but he was absolutely phenomenal in the finals. Why don't you talk a little bit about him?
Yeah. So he was someone that I picked up at the end of last year just for my minor league roster. Someone who I'm like, all right, we'll see if he can do anything at the major league level. If not, easy drop. He obviously has that really hot first month, and then after that, he was not good for a long period of time. And he was a high on base guy, and so he wasn't someone who would really hurt me anywhere. But he wasn't really doing anything in terms of homers, steals, basically anything except runs and on base. But these last couple of weeks, especially, and for the finals, he was just unbelievable. He had a couple homers. He was stealing a ton of bases, 471 on base in the finals. I mean, my team this year was really run by the rookies. At the beginning of the year, it was Jeremy Pena. I obviously traded him the Corey Seager deal. But then in my roster, my lineup, especially Kwan, O'Neal Cruz, Michael Harris, who I think was one of the most valuable players for me down the stretch, MJ Melendez. I just had a ton of rookies really come in, contribute, which I think it's tough to see so immediately, that impact from them. And so Kwan was one of those guys, and he had an absolutely great finals.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember you trying to shop him in the middle of the year at different points, and like I kind of thought you were going to cut him at some point. But hey, I mean, he was big, and good for you for staying the course with him. He definitely
for a while I really did not see his long-term fantasy impact. He wasn't hitting homers. He wasn't stealing bases. I didn't really think the added on base was enough to justify not contributing in other categories. But I mean, if he plays half as well as he did in the finals next year, he'll be a guy who I'll feel really comfortable putting in my outfield.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about next year for a second too. There's going to be a lot of pressure now for you to defend your title and repeat. You have any plans in the off season in terms of maybe like an approach to improve your team and repeat, or are you just solely basking in the victory at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying the victory, but always trying to make some moves. I feel very comfortable with my team moving forward now. Like I said, a lot of rookies. I'm gonna have guys who are going to improve, hopefully. Someone like Michael Harris, who I think is one of the best dynasty assets out there now. If you really look at the numbers, besides just the counting numbers, because he hasn't played as many games, he's really had just as good of a year as Julio Rodriguez has had. So he's someone I'm really keeping an eye out for to have a huge year next year. In Bo Bichette, he was not great for the first few months of the season. I mean, he was okay, but not that top 10, 20 player you're expecting out of him. And he had an absolutely fire last month. He was one of the best players in fantasy for that whole stretch. And so I feel good with my team. There are definitely going to be moves to make, but I don't really have an old roster for a championship winning team. So I don't feel like there are a ton of guys I have to sell off right now. So I'm just going to see it through. There are moves to make. I'll make those upgrades. And if not, I feel good with the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more thing I wanted to talk about right now was your big deadline move. We haven't had you on to talk about that, but you made a big deal that helped out your team a lot. You sent, let's look at it. Let me read the full trade. You sent Jeremy Pena, Mike Clevenger, Alex Cobb, and a first rounder in exchange for Corey Seager and a second rounder. Seager was not very good for you in the semis, although he did hit a pair of homers, and then he was great for you in the finals. I know Jeremy Pena, you mentioned him earlier. He had a hot start to the year, but kind of struggled down the stretch. What do you think about this deal? And obviously it helped you win a title, but how do you think this deal helps you, and how did it all come together?
Yeah, so I mean, looking back at all the trades I've made, I can't question any of them now because they all led to a finals. And so maybe there'll be a player who I traded away who becomes a superstar, but really, you know what they say in baseball, it would help you win a championship. It doesn't matter. It got you there. And so I think I'm not going to have really any regrets for any trades moving forward. Yeah, so this one especially, Corey Seager is just a very high floor type player for me. Jeremy Pena's on base was creeping below 300. You know, he's a very talented player, and I think he could definitely go back to what he was those first couple months. But to get someone like Corey Seager, who I can plug in my lineup consistently for, he has a 10-year contract with the Rangers. He's going to be good for a long time. He was one of the guys underperforming his expected weight on base the most. So he's one of the best hitters in baseball, honestly, and he's going to just be solid all around the board for a while. I mean, I gave up Pena, but besides that, the first round pick, we'll see what that prospect becomes. And then I just had a couple extra starting pitchers who I threw in there. I mean, I have a ton of starting pitchers now, so they would just be guys that I need for depth, but no one really that valuable moving forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair analysis of that trade. I think Cam and I largely agreed with a lot of that at the time when we discussed a trade a couple months back. But yeah, that was all the questions I had, Cam. Is there anything else you wanted to ask?
Yeah, that was basically it. I guess just the last thing, I guess, moving back in time a little bit, what were your expectations going into the season, and at what point did you start to think, okay, this team is legit, especially after last year missing the playoffs entirely on the last day? At what point did you think you knew you had a great team, and what kind of played into that?
Yeah, I mean, so I was expecting my team to be a playoff team. I wasn't expecting it to be in the top 3 or 4 by the end of the regular season, but when the season started, my team started really hot. I believe I won first 5 or 4 matchups. If not for that loss to Eric that was flipped. And so, my team was just playing really well. Starting pitching was looking great. Pieces were coming together. My rookies were playing well. And so I thought it was a team that would definitely make the playoffs, and then we'll see from there. And then everything that happened with the tiebreaker that last week, I did not think I was going to get a bye, which turned out to be very helpful because I'm not sure if I would have won that quarterfinals matchup. And if I lost then I wouldn't be talking to you guys right now. It's kind of the way it goes sometimes. You got to get lucky. that's what happened. And my team put up 2 really good weeks in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. That team definitely did. But yeah, any last words you want to say before you go?
No, just again, very grateful to win this league. I know how much time and research everyone puts into it, and it's definitely an honor because it's a very competitive league, probably the most fun fantasy league I've ever been a part of. And so it's really just an honor to win it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And no, thank you again, Jake, for coming on. You've got a great team, and you've really got a bright future with how young all these guys are, like you were saying. But yeah, no, that's all we have for this week. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next week.
Of course, see ya.
Jake. J-K-E-Jake.
This podcast is good.